Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. If not, welcome back. And if you're just passing by, I hope you enjoyed the video. So today we're going to be talking about African lifestyle in Russia, but this is more of my experience. And our quote of the day, our Bible verse of the day, I don't know how I'm doing this. Our Bible verse of the day is going to be Genesis chapter 7 verse 1. The Lord said to Noah, "Go into the boat with your whole family. I have found that you are the only one in all the world who does what is right." So let's get into it. Basically, I'm going to be talking about African lifestyle in Russia, when Africans started immigrating into Russia, why, and what's the progress so far. The reasons why, and just a lot of things. So yeah. Basically, we're going to start with an overview of the presence of Africans in Russia. So when we say this, I kind of when someone thinks like an African in Russia, it kind of sounds weird because you hardly see a lot of Africans in Eastern European countries. So it's a bit weird. It's definitely not the first thing that comes into mind when someone says, "Oh, I'm going to Europe." You probably think Western Europe, or definitely think Western Europe, or perhaps Australia or the US, the Americas, one of them, but definitely not Eastern Europe's. So this obviously goes like way back to like I think the 17th century. So I did a little bit of research on it. However, if I got anything wrong, if you're of African Russian descent, please correct me in the comment section if I got anything wrong. So basically, we're going to start with pretty much the Afro-Russians, often known as Black Russians, are the people of African heritage who settled in Russia many years ago. There are like estimates that about 50,000 Afro-Russians were in Russia in 2009. Those A lot of people like came and were given to Tsar Peter the Great, no Peter Veliki, and that was how like the whole ancestry of Pushkin came. Like Black people have been in Russia for a very long time, and some of them can be traced back to Piotr Golovin. Some of them can be traced back to Tsar Peter Veliki, stuff like that. So yeah, and I would say back in the 1950s, the 1990s, 1960s, when a lot of countries gained their independence, a bunch of them came here to Russia. A lot of Portuguese-speaking Africans, English-speaking Africans, French-speaking Francophone Africans, they came here to Russia to study and go back to their countries. They also came here to seek asylum. However, a majority of them did come here to study and went back to their countries. As you can see, most of them ended up being very prominent when they returned to their home countries. So I basically covered like the whole history of it, since when Africans started coming to Russia. And I would say when they came, they definitely left a little something here. God said, "Go into the earth and procreate," and they take that very, very seriously. Based on the Asia Sivodia Africa, there's this whole journal on it that they have online. I did some research on it. I'm actually literally reading from it. It says that life experience of African students was not shaped by socialist communist indoctrination, even where such indoctrination did take place. Many of the students arrived from countries which were classified as socialism oriented in the Soviet Union, but this classification rarely corresponded to the official ideology of these African states. So basically, they just came, they studied, they went back home. It wasn't that serious. However, they would say recently there has been a rise of Africans coming to Russia, me being an example, but mainly it's just to study. They're going to this there's a study that was done by Ballet Club, and this is what it reads: migration from African countries to Russia is still insignificant in scale, and its main channel is educational migration. In 2022, according to the official estimates of the main Department of Migration Affairs of the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Russia and the Ministry of Science and Higher Education of the Russian Federation, 38,885 Africans were legally staying in Russia. Over 1,000 of them had valid temporary residence permits. Almost 2,000 had valid resident permits at the end of the reporting period. Some had work permits, some had received citizenship, and there were about 34,360 Africans studying in Russia as of 2022. And guys, which country do you think has the most? I definitely thought it was probably Nigeria or Congo or Mali that had the most African students. However, it seems like we had the most students from Egypt with 15,668 people, followed by Morocco, 3,438 people. Nigeria, shockingly enough, 1,754 people. Algeria, 1,458 people, and Zimbabwe, 1,262 people. These were all of the documented Africans in Russia as of 2022 that were studying or working in Russia. Basically, a lot of people come here to study because it's relatively cheap to study in Eastern Europe, especially in Russia, as compared to studying in other European countries, which is most likely the same thing, the same knowledge that you get. And I would say from a different point of view, because oftentimes in history, it's whoever won the war that gets to write history. For the whole history on slavery, it was those that won that got to write on it. For colonization, it was those that won that got to write on it. The African nations were perceived as savage and dirty because at the end of the day, they weren't the ones that won the war. It was won by the Westerners, by their colonizers, and they got to paint the narrative of who won and who was dirty and who wasn't dirty, who lacked materials, who needed civilization. But you get the drift. I would say it's very interesting when you come to a place that has been subjected to a lot of propaganda, especially from the West, and you get to see and understand history from their point of view. So that way you kind of get subjective information from both sides, both the West and both the Eastern Europe, basically, and you get to form your opinion based on that, assuming you are not swayed by certain perspective and certain biases. Okay, so let's get back to it. Russia is known to give a lot of Africans scholarship. Like, that is a known fact. They give a lot. I think they have a quota that they have to fill every year. So like they give a bunch of African scholarship. There is an example from this scholar. His name is Jose Fernando Sambu, a recent graduate of the Russian Presidential Academy of National Economy and Public Administration, RADEPA, who now leads a department focused on interaction with African government bodies and diplomatic missions. And he shared his perspective, saying, "I always dreamed of studying in Russia. It boasts strong educational traditions and renowned scientific schools, particularly in technical and natural science fields." Basically, he was just talking about how his education in Russia really helped him, and it's made his career much better because he considered Portugal because his first language is Portuguese. Those that are from Angola and Mozambique, whose first languages are Portuguese, though in Africa. But he ended up studying here in Russia, and he seemed to have enjoyed it. I would also give my point of view because I study IR in Russia, and I would say it's kind of mind-blowing or opening for you to see different perspectives of things. So yeah, basically you've gotten the whole history of things, how a lot of Africans have been coming, and it's not just dark-skinned Africans that have been coming. However, recently there has been an increase, but not as much as before. It has still stayed as Egyptians and Moroccans, North Africans coming into Russia in waves, Middle Easterns, as compared to Black Africans or those in the Caribbeans, the Latin Americans. So let's continue. If we're talking about cultural integration and the community in Russia by Africans, we would say there has been formation of African communities and organizations. If you go to any city at all in Russia, you're definitely going to see an African association. And then in that, like in those associations, you're gonna have subgroups. I would use the university, for example. I think in this very famous university, Ruden, People's Friendship University in Russia, in Moscow, in the capital, it's basically like 70% of foreign students or foreigners, and in there, like, there's the African community, obviously. In there are like subgroups, like sub-zemlячества, that's what they call it, and then you see different communities: Egyptians, Russians, Colombians, Ecuadorians, Nigerians, South Africans. I've forgotten what people from Mozambique are called, but you get the gist. You understand. They're like literal subgroups, and because we have such different culture, a lot of people end up opening their own businesses and just like kind of promoting their culture and promoting their events in Russia. Especially, I would say, since the sanctions have become a lot more brutal, it gives the Russian citizens to see different cultures without having to travel out of the country, to see different perspectives without them having to leave the comfort of their own home. So I would kind of say it was for both sides. It kind of leads to cultural integration and cultural tolerance. Then there are also like cultural events, festivals, and celebrations. I believe that almost every university in Russia has a foreign student, like has a foreigner, and there are a lot of events and a lot of things that they do in Russia that help foreign students, that help foreigners. Although not all the students know about it, but there's Rasmaladyozh, Дружбы народов. Literally in every university, there are a lot of events, there are a lot of organizations dedicated for foreigners in Russia, especially foreign students in Russia. I would say there's this that I usually always go for. I haven't gone for it yet. Sembrina Festival Молодежь. It's basically a festival for the young people in Russia, and it pushes towards взаимодействие with it, basically interaction with people from different nationalities, as Russia itself is sorry, I'm kind of forgetting English. As a country with many nationalities, so to speak, different tribes, people from different areas, because you don't have like a specific face. You can't just say, oh, this person, you look Russian, I know you're Russian. You can literally see someone and think they're Chinese but they're Russian, see someone and you think they're Mongolian but they're Russian, see someone and think they're Italian but they're actually Russian. I wouldn't say there's an exact face, but since I think the face of Russia is basically Moscow and St. Petersburg, which is their western side, that is what is oftentimes portrayed in the media. Okay, so basically maintaining cultural identity while adapting to Russian society. A lot of Africans that come here are either Muslim or they're Christian. Basically, that is kind of like how Africa is. You don't really have a lot of atheist cultures. So since here Russia is an Orthodox country, I would say it's a bit easier for Christians to integrate in here, but for Muslims not so much, because again, this is an Orthodox Christian country, and I haven't seen a lot of mosques. It is not something I see often. It's not 50-50%. It's like a very small percentage of the population that are they're not Christian. Okay, however, I would say it's relatively easy to maintain a cultural identity while living in Russia. A lot of foreigners that come here just come here to study and go back to their countries. So they end up they don't end up interacting with people from other cultures. I would use, for example, the Chinese nationalities. Whenever I see them, they're always huddled in little groups and they don't like to interact with people from different countries or people with different cultures. Everyone just like finds people from their countries and decides to only speak in that language. They're like, yeah, no, I don't really want to talk to people from other countries. I would say sometimes, like I effectively try to reach out to people from other nationalities, but it's not something that you see every day. A lot of people are just comfortable being in their space, and that's totally fine. So I would say, once again, it's very easy to maintain a cultural identity because you will always find someone that is from your country or that speaks English, or you have some things in common. If you don't, you will definitely find someone who is a foreigner as well, and you get to bond with that as well. So now we're talking about daily life and lifestyle, the living arrangement and neighborhood among Africans. I live in a small city, so I can only talk based on my own experience. Most students that come here, again, most of the people that come to Russia come as students, not for work or anything. They come to study and then they go home. Most students live in the общежитие, that is literally the dormitory for students. And I would say most universities, they separate people based on where they come from. Like you have the you have the dormitory for the Russians, you have the dormitory for the Latin Americans, you have a dormitory for the Africans, which I don't really like because Africa is a continent. You cannot just put everybody in the same place. We have very different cultures. I'll get back to this later. Okay, let me just say it now. I was once put on the floor with a bunch of other Africans, North Africans, there's like the Middle Easterns, and South Africans and Central Africans, and none of them spoke English, which is my first language. And it was very horrible for me, and their level of Russian wasn't actually the best as well. So it was really frustrating for me because I couldn't communicate with them. We had such different cultures, and like fought on that floor all the time because we had such contrasting cultures, and no one was willing to tolerate anything. So yeah, that led to a lot of stress and a lot of yeah, I would just say that it's better if they, I don't know how they can do it, but if you're gonna bring a bunch of foreigners, you don't just put them in one place so people don't have like problems with each other or stuff like that. That's for people in the hostel, and there are a lot of people that end up living in apartments. However, it is extremely hard for you to live in Russia as a foreigner in an apartment. If you get an apartment, just stay with it for life. And it's kind of hard to get a beautiful apartment because there's this Soviet style apartment that's so common here, and a lot of the apartment you just see it, it's like, okay. I know that like if I was at home I'd definitely get something better, but I'm not home. So you have to choose what you can get. And the style isn't something that a lot of people kind of find attractive. I don't really find the style attractive, like the style of the apartments here very attractive. But then again, it's different cultures. You kind of have to get used to it. Then, and once more, it is extremely very hard. A lot of people do not like to rent houses or apartments to foreigners because it is, they have to get your registration. If you're a foreigner, you have to live with a registration, and you have your immigration card as well with you at all times. If you don't have registration, you are literally living in the country illegally. It's not allowed for you to be a foreigner and be without registration and your health insurance. A lot of things. There are a lot of documentation when it comes to living in Russia, but that's something for another day. And back to education and language acquisition, I believe Russian is fairly easy to learn if you are ready to learn it, but a lot of foreigners end up not learning Russian even though they stay here for like up to 7 years, because they are simply not ready to learn it, because they are so happy being surrounded by people who only speak their language. Like you can see someone that's anglophone or francophone and they just come and then they find their community and they're like, oh well, no need for me to speak Russian anyways. If I'm in class, I can just say, oh yeah, ruski не понимаю, простите, and then they fail. And then like that's literally what happens sometimes. Or sometimes some people just learn just to like pass in class and that's it. So yeah, language is something that a lot of people don't really learn very quickly. But it is fairly easy to learn it, and I would say I've got some testimony from some people, and also I as well also had that problem. It's kind of like a lot of Russians are very quiet, they're very individualistic, so even if you learn the language, it's kind of like, why am I learning it when I don't get to speak it with the Russians unless it's like a professional setting. But then again, you learn the language because you want to learn the language. Then on to the African food and cuisine. I would say African restaurants have come on the rise, especially Egyptian restaurants as well. You see the shawarma is everywhere. I don't know if shawarma is Egyptian and Lebanese, but I do know it came from the Middle East. I just don't know which country. But you see a bunch of them. There are a bunch of Egyptian restaurants literally everywhere. And they're in the capital in Moscow and in St. Petersburg as well. You see a lot of African restaurants now, like West African restaurants. I'm not sure of Southern African restaurants, but you see a lot of West African restaurants a lot. There's this restaurant I think that's very popular in Moscow, La Cabana. They basically serve a lot of West African foods, especially Nigerian food. So yeah, you see it. People can't survive without their food for that long. Okay, and the cuisine, you can find alternatives to like the food you cook at home, but it won't be the same thing. And then there was this major culture shock for me, was that, you know, this stuff, semolina, semovita. Back home we eat it like we call it swallow in Nigeria. Some people call it fufu. I think that's the Ghanaians that call it fufu. Fufu for us is a different type of swallow. The South Africans call it pap, from what I remember. I'm not sure what Central Africans call it as well. I know that Congolese, they call it fufu as well, just like Ghanaians. But basically, yeah, Russians eat it like it's cereal. I was so surprised when I saw them like mixing it with milk and sugar, and I was like, what? You're supposed to eat this with soup. But yeah, very, very shocking. But yeah, that's it. So you can find a lot of things to use to substitute your home food. If it's the fish, you'll find it. If it's the pepper, you'll find it. If it's the dried shrimp, you'll find it. Even egusi, it's literally melon soup. But sometimes you won't see it here, but you can always substitute with the seeds they have here. I kind of forgot what it's called because I still have mine from home. But yeah, basically, you can always substitute your home food. But you have to be mindful. You live with other people, so you kind of have to be careful of the smell. Your food may smell nice to you, but it won't smell nice to the next person. So let's continue. We have challenges faced. with it. Like, as for Africans living in Russia, then again, I am generalizing my experience for everyone. If I am wrong, please correct me in this comment section. Anyways, yeah, the racial discrimination and stereotypes, the major theme that you hear, especially for Africans, like, oh, you guys are poor, especially as a Black African. You hear like, oh, you guys are poor, you guys don't have water, like, I'm tired of the water jokes, guys, you find something else. It's not funny anymore. Like, okay, so, but there's this ignorance that a lot of people have, like back in let's say Nigeria, or let's say South Africa. Oh, you guys don't have water, you guys don't have education, you guys is just like a small hut you live in, you ride zebras, like the basic stereotypes. And sometimes it's very irritating because I'm like, the internet is free. If you want to research something, you can just go research something. You don't need to like do all of this. And then there's some silly questions, I think, especially from those from the, is it East or South Asian? I've forgotten which part it is, but those with the from Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, a lot of the Stan countries, they are very ignorant as well, and they're a lot in Russia. I used to have a problem with them because they acted like they owned the country, like they would be racist and the Russians wouldn't be racist. And it used to be so crazy because I'm like, this isn't even your country. Why are you feeling so possessive of a country that isn't yours? The people who are citizens don't mind and are inviting us here, and you're the one saying, why are you Black? Why are you white? It's so ridiculous, guys. But yeah, I would say that's the major thing. You don't really see it from Russians themselves. Sometimes you may see it, but it's usually people from other nationalities like me. So for real, you're an immigrant from your country, maybe even staying here illegally. So now I would say the roles in promoting multiculturalism in Russia. Yeah, actually I would say Russia has become very diverse recently. It's been accepting a lot of Western values, not everywhere but most places, and they have been trying their best to integrate foreigners here in Russia. They're very accepting people. I would say that, although the documentation could kill you, like release me, but however, yeah, pretty much everything is fine. Okay, guys, so I'm gonna have to continue this another time. I'm really tired. Next time I'm going to talk about my personal experiences, and I'm going to talk to some other people as well. They're going to be talking about their stories living as an African in Russia, the things and like interactions with local Russians, how it is to find a job in Russia as an immigrant. Like, definitely you're gonna go home, but like guys, you're a college student, you need to eat, which technically you aren't actually allowed to like have an official job in Russia if you're a student. And just, yeah, how the trend in African migration to Russia is something that's going to continue, or there's going to be a potential stop for it, and how the immigration is going to eventually influence the Africa-Russia relationship, as we can see that Russia is no longer pursuing relationships with the Western Europe and America. What does this mean for the future political and economic probably directions of Russia and Africa? Is Russia going to become more diverse with more Africans, and are African countries going to accept a lot of Russians into their country? Is it going to be an exchange, or is it going to stop? Will the lack of tolerance of the Russian citizens and the African nations stop any future collaboration? Well, we'll just have to see and find out. Then of course I'm definitely going to put my personal opinions and a lot of things. I hope you enjoyed this topic that I brought up, and let me know if you need me to talk about anything else in the future. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye.